Hi, my name is Caleb McGrady, and I will be presenting my Python queuing project using the knowledge I have learned from Python in ENGI 230 at Liberty University. During this presentation, I will present the problem description, project value, code explanation, demonstration of my code, the lessons I learned, and my conclusion. This code will calculate the various queuing calculations based on a user's given input, whether that is by file input or manual input. The calculations to be returned are the server utilization noted by row, the percent of time the server is idle, the number of customers in the queue noted by LQ, the number of customers in system noted by LS, the average waiting time in the queue noted as WQ, the average waiting time in the system noted as WS, and the probability of n customers being in the system, and that is noted by P of n. This program assumes that there is only one server available that can process one customer at a time, which is the MM1 format. To create my program, I used PyCharm instead of Python, which is a downloadable program that is similar to Python, and I found it to be more user interactive and better to code with, and so I chose to use it. And so the first thing, as you can see, I have the problem description so the user can read the description of the problem. I had that commented out at the beginning. And then the first thing that I did is, I'd like to point out, is I initialized my data array, and basically it was just the statistics that I was trying to calculate with the scenario at the beginning. The next thing I did was made a while true loop for the data input, and so what this loop will do, it will prompt the user to input the number of scenarios they would like to run as an integer, and it will run this except that there's a value error, which would be if they put in a float or if they put in like a character string, and then it will print out this is not a valid input, and then we'll ask them again to enter the number of scenarios. And then also, if they enter an integer but it is less than 0, it will print out the number of scenarios must be non-negative because you can't have a negative number of scenarios. And then it will ask them to enter the number of scenarios again. And it will do this until the input is a successful integer greater than 0. And then it will break from this loop. Next, I made a section of code for the data input, which is the bulk of the code, and it will depend on the user's input of 1 for file input or anything else from manual input. If the user enters 1 for the number of scenarios they entered, it will print out this section telling them how to import their file, and then this section will split the data up and will make the data correct. And then it will print the file data, and then it will use the data from the file to calculate the calculations that will be needed for the formatting at the end. And then finally, once these calculations are done, it will append the data array by adding a new row, and it will print all the calculations it just did for that loop, and then it will close the file. If the user wanted a manual input, it will give a series of while true loops, which will prompt the user to enter the 4 inputs that they would need, and will prompt them to enter a correct input if they would enter a wrong input or a not valid input. And then after that, it will use the user's data input to calculate the same calculations from before. And once again, it would append the data array to add these calculations to the bottom of the array. And then after this is all done, for the number of rows in data, if the row is 0, which is the initial row, which has the titles and headings, it will print dashes across, and then it will print based on the spacing provided and formatted. It will print each heading in accordance to the spacing provided. And then for each additional row, it will just print the data that goes with that heading below it and will be formatted as shown here. And then after that, it will print finished, and that will be it. So now I will show an example of my code running, and I will do 2 examples, one with file input and one with manual input. So I'll just click run up here. And so the first one, I'll do 2 scenarios for file input to do 2 files. And so as you can see, first, I have put both the files I'm going to use in the project folder on my computer with the same folder as the project code, which will make it easier to extract. So I'll do 2 scenarios, and then I will enter 1 for file input, and then I will enter the name of the file. The first one is python test.txt. And then it will show the file data, and then I will enter the name of the second file, which is python test2.txt. And then as you can see, it shows this file's data, and then it prints out the data in a table, which is formatted nicely. And as you can see, the first scenario is the first file, the second scenario is the second file, and then it gives the calculations for the input that was provided, and then finishes. Now next I will do a manual input, and so I'll do 2 scenarios again, and then I will enter a letter for anything else, but it will give me an error because it's not a number and I need to enter a number. So I'll do another number, 3 is good. And then the number of customers, how about 5? Number of time in hours, 3. The average time in minutes, how about 7? The number of customers expected, how about 20? And then for the second scenario, let's do a couple random numbers. How about 6, 8, 4, and 15? How about that? And then as you can see, it prints out the table. Each scenario is labeled and it does the calculations for each one. And then finishes. And that's how the project works. Through this project, there were a couple lessons I learned. First, Python is becoming very useful and a very widely known programming language in the industry and in the real world coding problems. And then second, Python is very user-friendly and it's not difficult to learn with some prior coding knowledge, as before this I had not had any coding experience with Python, but I had had several other platform coding throughout classes, and it was easy to learn. And then third, it is very well documented on the internet because it is a free coding program, and this greatly expedites the learning process. To conclude, this coding program will make queuing calculations significantly easier and more efficient, and then possible next steps would be to add more calculations that can be used with the given input and allow for the user to choose how many servers or model type they would like.